Hello, and welcome back to the Crime Reel. For today's true crime narration, we shall be looking at the life of Celeste Beard Johnson. Celeste was born on the 13th of February 1963 in Santa Barbara, California. Her biological parents are not known. She was adopted within days of her birth by a couple by the names of Edwin and Nancy Johnson. Edwin and Nancy, who were unable to have their own biological children, adopted 4 babies within the space of 4 years. Celeste was the second oldest of their children. She was a bright child who could be extremely charming one minute, but could become incredibly mean the next. When Celeste was a teenager, Edwin lost his job and the family started to struggle for money. Arguments between Edwin and Nancy followed, and their marriage broke down in 1977. Their divorce was extremely acrimonious. During her teenage years, Celeste became increasingly reckless and out of control. She began skipping school and hanging out with older kids. It is believed that during this time, she attempted to take her own life. When she was around 16 years old, she began dating a boy by the name of Craig Bratcher, who was 2 years her senior. At the age of 17, she fell pregnant and, shortly afterwards, on the 6th of December 1980, her and Craig married. Just 2 months later, she gave birth to their twin girls, who they named Jennifer and Christina. With the 2 teenagers suddenly thrown into parenting and married life, their relationship began to suffer. The marriage lasted just 18 months and was plagued with arguments, violence and infidelity. By 1983, the couple were divorced and the twins spent their early lives bouncing between the homes of their parents, extended family and sometimes in the care of friends. 5 years later, in December 1988, Celeste married for the second time to a man by the name of Henry Wolfe. This marriage did not last long. Henry was unsettled by Celeste's erratic and controlling behaviour, whilst Celeste claimed that Henry was physically abusive towards her. In 1991, 5 years after marrying Henry, 28-year-old Celeste married for the 3rd time. Her new husband, Jimmy Martinez, was unaware that Celeste was still legally married to Henry at the time of their wedding. Celeste's divorce from Henry was finalised the following year. Again, during her 3rd marriage, Celeste claimed that she suffered abuse at the hands of her husband, and the marriage was once again short-lived. Throughout her 2nd and 3rd marriages, the twins continued to live either with her, their father Craig, friends, or family members. There was very little stability in their upbringing, and their relationship with Celeste was very poor. After the breakdown of her 3rd marriage, Celeste began waitressing at a country club in Austin, Texas. It was here in 1993 that she met Stephen and Elise Beard. Stephen and Elise had been married for 45 years and had 3 children together, 2 sons and a daughter who were all in their 30s and 40s. Stephen and Elise were extremely wealthy. Stephen had made his millions through his work as a top executive at Fox Broadcasting, but at 68 years old had now retired. His wife, Elise, had been a keen golfer but was slowly losing her battle with cancer. Stephen had been by her side as she fought the disease for over 6 months. Elise died on the 13th of October 1993. Stephen did not know how to be alone. Within 3 weeks of his wife's death, he invited Celeste to have dinner with him and the pair began dating. Stephen showered her with gifts, and by the end of 1993, Celeste had moved into Stephen's luxury home. With a 38-year age difference between them, by this point she was 30 and he was 68, Stephen's family and friends were very suspicious of Celeste's motives for dating him. However, their relationship continued and they married the following year on the 18th of February 1995. A prenuptial agreement was drawn up which stated that in the event of their divorce, Celeste would be entitled to $500,000. Meanwhile, the twins were still being fought over by their parents. Christina ended up living with Celeste, whilst Jennifer remained with her father, Craig. Stephen provided Celeste with the money that she needed to fight these custody battles. A few months into their marriage, Stephen found out that Celeste had been taking jewellery that had belonged to the first wife from their safety deposit box. She had been selling this jewellery and keeping the money. Stephen, shocked by this deception, filed for divorce. However, the couple worked through the issue and Stephen stopped the divorce proceedings. Stephen developed a good relationship with Christina and Jennifer, treating them as if they were his own daughters. It wasn't long before cracks in the marriage began to appear once again. Stephen was not happy with Celeste's excessive spending, while she seemed to treat him with disdain. By late 1998, the arguments became so bad that Stephen was threatening to divorce her and cut her off financially. And as a result, Celeste said the stress of the arguments was too much for her and that she intended to take her own life. In an attempt to help his wife, Stephen arranged for her to be treated at St. David's Pavilion, a mental health facility in Austin. It was here that Celeste met 42-year-old Tracy Tarleton, a bookstore manager who'd had a nervous breakdown in February of 1999 and was recovering at St. David's. The two women became friends. Tracy, who was openly gay, was infatuated with Celeste. Many people close to both Tracy and Celeste believed that their friendship had developed into them becoming lovers, a fact which Tracy confirms, but Celeste denies. On 2nd of October 1999, 74-year-old Stephen was asleep in his bed while Celeste was asleep in a separate bedroom in their 5,000 square foot home. Christina, now 18, was also at home and Jennifer was out with her boyfriend. At around 3 a.m, Stephen awoke to the most horrific pain in his stomach. As he looked down, he saw that his stomach was wide open. Despite his pain, he managed to reach for the phone and call the emergency services. Celeste and Christina were awoken by the sound of the emergency services arriving. They had no idea what was going on and rushed to see what had happened to Stephen. Initially, the paramedics had no idea what had happened to Stephen. He was literally holding his stomach together. Thinking that he'd possibly had a recent stomach surgery which had ripped apart, they struggled to keep him alive in order to transfer him to hospital. As they were moving him from his room, they spotted a single shotgun shell and realised that he had been shot directly in the stomach at point-blank range. Stephen was transferred to Brackenridge Hospital in Austin by helicopter. He was not expected to survive the night. Celeste and Christina dashed to the hospital and were soon joined by Jennifer and both of the twins' boyfriends. When the police questioned the group at the hospital, one of the boyfriends mentioned, as he put it, Celeste's strange friend, Tracy. Despite the doctor's grim predictions, Stephen survived the night and made slow steps towards recovery. The police began to investigate Tracy and soon discovered that she owned a shotgun. Tests performed showed that the gun was a match to the shotgun shell found at the scene. On 4th of November 1999, Tracy was charged with the shooting. She admitted going to the house that night, entering through an unlocked door and then shooting Stephen. Tracy was clearly infatuated with Celeste, and investigators were convinced that Tracy had not acted alone. On the night of the shooting, Celeste's reactions had appeared very strange, even complaining that this was dreadful timing as they were due to travel to Europe the following day. After speaking to the police briefly on the night of the shooting, she declined further interviews and refused the police access to interview her husband whilst he was in hospital. It became clear to the police that Celeste and Tracy were in a relationship, and they tried to get Tracy to implicate Celeste, but she simply would not do it. After over 3 months and 7 surgeries, Stephen had made sufficient progress to be discharged from hospital in January 2000. Sadly, however, within days of his release, he died from a blood clot. The case was now a murder investigation. Tracy still denied that Celeste was involved. In July 2000, 6 months after her husband's death, Celeste got married for the 5th time to a bartender by the name of Cole Johnson. After months of not giving any details about Celeste's involvement in the shooting to the authorities, Tracy read about Celeste's new husband in a local newspaper and realised that Celeste had been using her all along. Tracy then told the prosecutors that Celeste had persuaded her to shoot Stephen. Celeste had convinced Tracy that Stephen had emotionally abused her to the point where she believed her only escape was suicide. Celeste told Tracy that they needed to get rid of him so they could have a life together. Following this new information, Celeste was arrested on the 28th of March 2002 and charged with her husband's murder. In October that year, new charges were added for solicitation of capital murder after it emerged that Celeste had asked her personal assistant to hire a hitman to kill Tracy. At trial, the prosecutors presented the case that Celeste had only married Stephen for his money and wanted him killed when he grew tired of her spending and started speaking about divorce. Her daughters testified that they knew of her relationship with Tracy and had heard their mother make threats against Stephen. As part of her deal, Tracy testified against Celeste. The defence, on the other hand, argued that Celeste had nothing to do with the shooting and that Tracy had acted alone because she was obsessed with her. The defence implied that Celeste's daughter had lied on the stand as they knew they would get less inheritance money if Celeste was acquitted. The jury deliberated for 23 hours before finding Celeste guilty of murder. In March 2003, she received the mandatory life sentence for this crime. She is currently being held at the Christina Melton Crane Unit in Gatesville, Texas, and will be eligible for parole in April 2042. She still claims that she is completely innocent and that Tracy acted alone. Tracy received a 10-year sentence in exchange for testifying against Celeste and was released on parole in August 2011. Thanks very much for listening to that story. Please leave any comments down below. Also, just for your information, under the community tab, please note I've been doing shout outs and posts for quite a few other channels: History Profiles, Unsolvable, Becky Mills, Forgotten Lives, Mortis Media, and of course Briefcase. Just if you're looking for something different to watch, then I highly recommend these. Now it's time for Petty Crime. Okay, first up today, we have Leonard and Fifi. These have been sent in by Rebecca Adams, and she would like you to see both her rescues. This is Fifi coming in for a sneaky cuddle. Then we have Master Florist Leonard, just adding the final touches to his display. Leonard is seen relaxing in his chair and his front room. Thanks for sending them in, Rebecca. Then we have sent in by the wonderful Master Jeep Hightower. This is not even her cat, but it's a friend of hers. The cat is called Whisker, and he's crazy. When he gets hungry, he attacks their ankles. They thought they brought home a girl, but were shocked to find it's a boy. So that's Whisker. Thanks for sending them in, Master Jeep. And that's the end of Petty Crime. One other thing that Master Jeep asked me to do was she wanted to do a face reveal, as she's always on the channel leaving comments and wanted everybody to see who the Master Jeep is. She's asked me to let it be known that she's single. Thanks very much for listening to the Crime Reel. Stay safe. Goodbye. Psst. Celeste and 5 other inmates published a cookbook that could be made in prison cells. All profits from the sale of the book go towards the Justice Institute, a non-profit to help the wrongly convicted. Goodbye.